Today we decided not to invite a guest speaker. We decided to have fellow Rotarians be the speakers today, and some of us are going to talk about our most memorable holiday, whether it's Christmas or whatever people celebrate. So there's going to be me. I brought my book. We've got Susan Mayle's going to say a few words. John Shirley's going to say a few words, and then we're going to have a pop quiz about what is Boxing Day, and Brian Mayle has the answer to that. So I'm going to go ahead and start this off, and then we're going to go with John, and then we'll go with Susan. Okay, is that all right with you, Susan? Okay, I was going to flip a coin, but anyway, I brought my husband Pat here for a reason, and he's going to have to actually stand up and show you about this adventure that he and I undertook 30 years ago.
Got married.
We got married, yes, but the getting married was the end, was in the middle of this journey. I'm just going to read this out. When Pat and I decided to get married, we were sitting in a restaurant in New Orleans. We had purchased an airplane together, and Pat had flown up to meet me. We called the plane Bird. Bird was gorgeous, white with brown, and her numbers were November 2871 uniform. We paid $7,000 in 1976 for this plane, and knew today it would cost $210,000. So we had a pretty good deal. They look the same, believe it or not, all these years later. We bought the plane as an alternative to a Volkswagen Thing. If you ever saw those, it looked like a miniature Jeep, but broke very easily. We were living in Belize at the time. He was living on a ranch and I was living in Belize City, and so we wanted to spend a little more time together, and so he convinced me that buying a plane would be much more beneficial than buying a car. So I paid half and he paid half. And apparently my sisters did not know until I was up there in December visiting my dad that I actually did own half the airplane and I had paid half for the airplane. But Pat and I always joked that he could sell his half of the plane but not mine, and vice versa. He had asked a Mennonite pilot from Belize to fly up to meet him to fly it back. And so this great guy came up to New Orleans, and Pat and I flew back in a jet, and Pat and Peter flew back in this little plane. I guess we felt God would be on our side if we had a missionary in the plane with Pat. We decided to get married, and so we called my family and announced we were getting married, and we wanted to come to Rosetown, Saskatchewan, which is where I'm from, and have the wedding in my family church, the United Church of Canada. We decided to fly ourselves up there in our Cessna 172. So sometime on December 4th, we packed up the plane and bid goodbye to our Belizean friends and Pat's mother and began the trip of a lifetime. That first day, we landed in Chetumal on the southeast coast of the Yucatan, and we cleared Mexican customs. That in itself is a feat. And then took off the next day for Villahermosa. So we were flying up the east coast of Mexico. When we took off from Chetumal, one of our radios failed, and the backup was pretty flaky, but we continued up the east coast of Mexico anyway. There are rules about flying without radios, but we landed safely at our destination using hand-operated light signals from the controllers on the ground. Undaunted, we took off again for Veracruz, where we planned to spend the night at a swanky old European-style hotel called the Macombo. This takes a while, but I promise you I'm halfway through it. We traveled the next day to Tampico and then to McAllen. Now, Pat has a chart. He could show you exactly where this was all happening. So we went from Tampico to McAllen, and we spent some time there finally getting the radios fixed. And then we went to San Angelo, Texas via Uvalde. We got to Santa Fe, New Mexico on December 9th via Roswell, and we avoided Area 51. Thank goodness. On the 12th of December, we flew to Scottsbluff, Nebraska, where we stayed in a motel with a tropical-themed indoor pool. The frozen states all have these winter vacation spots for those who can't actually go to the tropics. And everybody has a really great time. But it's, fake grass and palm trees around a swimming pool. We flew to Dickinson, North Dakota to visit my sister, but it was getting dark and we decided to leave for Canada anyway. Unfortunately, the headwinds were so strong that we set down in Williston, a mere 100 miles away, because the traffic on the highway was moving faster than we were. On December 14th, we got to Regina, Saskatchewan, cleared customs, and went on up to Rosetown. We proceeded to fly around the prairies to Saskatoon, to Calgary, and back and forth, and we stopped flying on December 23rd. A friend of the family put heaters and blankets on to keep Bird from freezing up. We did fly around town and took pictures of the area, including Tadpole Grove, my sister's future husband's farm. After we got married, we took the train to Ottawa. So because I was supposed to be debriefed by the agency I worked for while I was in Belize. We traveled through northern Ontario's Lake of the Woods. If any of you have ever been up there in the summer, it's quite different in the winter. And the train only froze up once. On January 24th, we took off for a return trip to Belize without a tachometer. Bob? As it had broken under the stress of being in Saskatchewan, Bird also rebelled by cracking her paint and leaving chips of it in the snow. She was not a very happy airplane. We spent the night at Rock Springs, Wyoming, after getting the tack replaced in Billings, Montana. And while we were in Rock Springs, we were treated to the revelries of the Miss Petroleum of Wyoming beauty pageant. And these young women would not have been given a break by Donald Trump if he had been there. We decided to fly over the mountains to Grand Junction, Colorado, because we wanted to see that part of the Rockies. And so we were dealing with downdrafts and trying to stay in the air through the whole trip to Grand Junction. We eventually returned to Santa Fe for a few days, where we bought an old adobe house, and then made our way back to McAllen for more work on the plane and stayed there way too long, 3 weeks. We made it back to Belize on March 2nd by way of Chetumal, where we had to have the runway lights turned on for us as it was dark. The authorities could have given us a really bad time for that, but they didn't. It must have been my charms and good looks. So that's my most memorable holiday. Okay, so now we have John Shirley, and I think he has more paper than me. No?
No.
Okay.
It's a lot less.
So any of you who would like to see the chart of that journey, Pat has them with him in there. Because I thought Bob Cowan in particular, fellow pilot, would have enjoyed that. So thank you.